20th, we'll call the meeting to order. It is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Hutchinson Utilities Commission. The first agenda item is a declaration of any conflict of interest by the commissioners. Are there any?
None.
Being none, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, approval of the consent agenda, which includes the minutes and the ratification of payment of bills. Any questions from the commissioners on the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Don and seconded by Matt to approve the consent agenda as proposed. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is the approval of the financial statements, so we'll turn that over to Jared and Jeremy.
Didn't have a whole lot. Mentioned last month that cash would go down in November with the bond payments, and you'll see that it did. One thing to mention on the electric is I did get the transmission from Great River a couple hours ago, and it was about 20,000 less than I estimated. So should put the electric's net loss down to about 15,635. Other than that, everything was pretty similar. Gas was down a little, revenue and usage wise due to the warmer month. It will not be the same thing in December now coming up when we do December's financials. That's all I had.
Just kind of a couple highlights, just touching on the debt service with just over 2.9 million in debt service payments going out in November. So if you pull that out of the reduction in cash of 2.1 million, we actually had a positive cash from operations for November. So even with the reduced consumption, power supply costs were down, commodity costs were down, so we still end up having a pretty good month if we take out the debt service. Just kind of looking at ratios, if you guys are keeping an eye on some of those things year to date, when you look at the combined divisions through November, we're tracking at, meeting, or exceeding most of the targets, either our HEC targets or our 2023 budget. So we're moving in a little bit better direction than some of those. As far as each division, they've been fairly consistent. The areas where there's some red, we've been running at a loss on the electric side, so nothing has really significantly changed. They've improved a little bit from the beginning of the year, but some of those areas are still fairly consistent. And then on the gas side, all those targets are at or exceeding kind of where our budget and targets want to be for that division. So overall, from an organizational standpoint, we're in a pretty good shape. Just talking about a little bit of the electric usage, just to kind of remind people, obviously 3M was down for a little extended period of time in September. Minnesota Specialties was down in September for almost 2 weeks, working on maintenance, and they were also down in November of this year for almost a couple weeks as well. So each of those months we saw a reduction in sales of 520,000 kilowatt hours. So they're doing some maintenance internally on their facilities and the fermenters and things like that. So we lost some significant kilowatt hour sales just because they were down doing things, and then 3M was down for an extended period of time. So when you factor in kind of some of those anomalies, when you're tracking relative to budget, we're almost at 86.5% of the budget, so we take up about 0.4%. If you pull a couple of those unusual anomalies that have been happening. I did talk with Uponor yesterday. They look like it's going to be a stable outlook for 2024 for their facility. They're looking to hire a few more people, but they anticipate stable or just a slight uptick. It's based on what their forecasts and projections are. So that will hold, I think that'll be good for us to have some stability in that area out there. It was one of our larger users. And then on the flip side with the gas side, because they were down for maintenance, we saw the same thing on the gas side outside of the warmer weather. Obviously, you guys are well aware of how warm it's been, so consumption is down. But Minnesota yeast is down almost 18 million MCF for the year. A lot of that's had to do with early in the year with some operational changes, January, February, March area time frame. Some had to do in May. They were down, only running one fermenter, I think, at that point. And then September, November, because they were down for almost 2 weeks, we lost, they were down about 3 million MCF each of those months. So a pretty significant amount from that area, and that's in our large general class. And then obviously the industrial class has been tracking down fairly consistently all year. So, but with that, obviously we're not buying as much gas and don't have any new sales. So, but overall, I think things are looking okay relative to the reduction in consumption. I think that's it. Those are kind of the things I just wanted to highlight. Any questions on any of the financials? Kind of how we're trending? Okay.
If no further questions for Jeremy or Jared, I'd entertain a motion to approve the financial statements.
I'll make a motion to approve the financial.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Bob and seconded by Kathy to approve the financial statements as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Financial statements are approved. Agenda item number 4 is open forum, where those from the community are welcome to address the commission. And seeing none, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is communication. We'll start with City Administrator Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're kind of the same boat you guys are, doing year end, so council approved budgets and tax levies yesterday. Unfortunately, they reappointed Don to the utility commission, so you guys have to be with him for 4 more years. But otherwise, yeah, same boat as you guys, not a whole lot.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll move on to divisions and start with Dan.
Nothing today.
With the extended fall that we've had, we were able to kind of clean up every project we had to get done this year. All developments and new homes, things like that are completed. And we're still digging today, so it's, we're able to kind of continue on with more projects actually. So it's been kind of a different, weird fall, so we're taking advantage of it.
Good. Mike, what's new in your world? Nothing?
Nothing to report.
Okay. John?
As Dave said, we're still out there working in the field. Pipeline project's going well. The pipeline is in, it's complete, except for each end. They have to build their portion of the interconnect station, and they have a lot to do at the Heartland Corn end. Station heater has to be put in, a bunch of regulator runs. They're going to run a smart pig January 3rd. I've never seen it done with the air before, so it'll be something new. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but and then we'll be filling the odorizer tank the next day, and then they're looking at about the middle of January. We'll be purging the line for them, pushing all the air out, filling it with gas. I don't like doing that, but we'll get it done and get that station flowing.
It seems like it's a little ahead of schedule even, isn't it?
It is. The weather has really helped. It's been good construction.
It's a good project. Thank you for your efforts on that. Anything else, John?
That's it.
All right. Jared? All right. Angie, anything from a human resources perspective?
Not really, just finishing up year end.
All right. Thank you. Anything from legal, Mark?
Nothing today.
Thank you very much. And General Manager?
Just wrapping up some year-end stuff. Kind of mentioned in a communication, I think a couple weeks ago, I'll be updating the cash model for us with some of these projects until moving forward, and then kind of projecting where I think we'll be at year-end cash for operating budget. So I'll be working on that in the 5-year budget forecast, so you guys can kind of see what maybe in the next 5 years looks like related to wholesale costs and some commodities things. So I'll be doing that over the next week or so, a couple weeks. We'll obviously continue to be spending some time on the union negotiations as we kind of move that process forward. Certainly you guys are all well aware that we probably won't have something settled before the end of the year, so you know, our group will end up having to get together probably, I'm guessing, sometime end of this year, early part of next year to keep that process moving forward. So we'll be spending a little bit more time kind of finalizing things on that end. Then obviously part of that piece will be finalizing the budget book. If the commission wants to change different things or tweak different things in the operating budget as we move forward, obviously I'll wait to do that before I finish compiling the final budget book and getting that out to you. So some of that will be time dependent on how things kind of move forward. So I don't want to duplicate effort by doing the budget book several times. So, and then we're just trying to meet with local legislators coming up for the legislative session. So Deb Bergman from MRES and I have reached out to our local legislators. We're going to try to set something up early part of January to talk about really the initiatives from a public power standpoint moving forward within the state, talking about some of the laws that have been put in place and some of the things that could be considered at the next legislative session. So hopefully we can get on their calendar fairly soon, early part of the year before the legislative session really starts getting going fairly quickly. So working on a little bit of that, and then just getting some stuff ready for 2024. So it's kind of what the last couple weeks are going to look like here for me. So everything's moving.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next on the agenda is the section where we review and approve changes to policies. There are no policies for review. And there is one policy with some proposed changes, actually a new policy. Angie, is that right?
Correct, yeah. So instead of actually making it approval for a change, we're going to be making an addition to an organizational policy for non-exempt and exempt handbooks. So I did make a corrected board action form that you guys all have in front of you, just explaining the ESST policy and how it's going to work for Hutch Utilities Commission, and that the law starts January 1 of 2024, so I'll make sure to post our appropriate posters that we need and get communication out to all the employees. But since Hutch Utilities is actually more generous with their vacation and sick time, this is just more of a tracking purpose for us. So we are going to be designating all vacation and sick time the first 48 hours that the hours are used by employees is going to be cross-designated to ESST, and then we'll show that balance on the pay stubs.
Okay. So there's a revised board action form, but there was no additional changes to the policy itself,
Correct.
other than what was
Because it's just it's a new policy.
So no changes were made to the policies that were included in the package, just change to the board
Yeah,
action
and
form.
that is the only policy, that's included.
Yeah, and really the definition of the ESST, if some of you guys aren't familiar, which I'm sure all of you are, is it just allows a little bit more liberal definition of what people can use the ESST time for. There's different designations and things, so it allows that first 48 hours to be used a little bit more, a broader range perspective. So, and then if anything isn't finalized or 48 hours isn't used by the employee, then there will be a carryover factor up to a maximum of 80 hours. So we could have that situation of, everyone's required to use 40 hours of vacation every year here, so for sure people are going to use 40, but if no one uses an additional vacation or sick time, you could have 8 hours left in that 40-hour bank that we need to track and accrue. So we don't anticipate there being a lot of that, but there could be an accrual piece that.
And then the start of 2025, employees will get a new 48-hour designation for ESST, and it just kind of keeps going forward from there. And the format that was used for the policy is pretty much an exact replica from the League of Minnesota Cities, with a few changes to showing HUC instead of a city, and just how we're going to apply the policy to us.
Okay. Any questions from the commissioners on the addition of the new policy?
Nope.
If none, I'd entertain a motion.
I can make a motion to approve the policy changes, add organization policy to exempt and non-exempt handbooks.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Kathy and seconded by Matt to approve the policy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Policy is added. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, item number 7, unfinished business, and we have none, so we'll move on to new business. Agenda item 8A is approved requisition 009766, 3M substation relay and RTU upgrades for phase 2, amendment number 1. Dan, is that you?
It is. This requisition amendment would authorize DGR Engineering to complete that 3M project we have for the relays and RTU upgrade. We broke it up into 2 because we knew this was going to span over a period of time, because we have to work around 3M's shutdown schedule, which is only once per year. And we knew we couldn't get it all done in one weekend. So we got the first half done this past Labor Day weekend, and then this second phase 2, I guess, will be whenever the next shutdown is. It sounds like maybe this Labor Day again, but from what I heard last Labor Day, so we just gotta work around their schedule. So this just authorizes that second half of that upgrade project.
Any questions for Dan?
I'll make a motion to approve requisition 009766 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Matt, seconded by Bob to approve the requisition as proposed. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Requisition approved. Thank you, Dan. Next on the agenda, item 8B, approve requisition 009767, Hutch Substation, 115 kV rebuild, amendment number 1. Jeremy, your name's on that one.
I'll let Dan take it.
Dan, go ahead.
Copy paste error.
That was a very fast handoff.
He's more than delighted to do it.
It's a bigger dollar number, I don't know. This is somewhat similar. This is a requisition and an amendment to the original task order for the Hutch sub project. The original task order project scope was just the preliminary design and transformer procurement, which has been completed this year. And now this would authorize going forward final design, construction, all the way through commissioning. So that's why this is a larger dollar amount. But, so this is just, again, kind of the second half now, or well, more than the second half of this project. But the first half is kind of the feeling out, discovery time, to figure out the project scope, and so that's what they did. And now we'll move ahead with final design and the rest for the next 3 years.
Jeremy, I was a little excited to see where you went with this when your name was on the board action.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan, for taking that. Any questions for Dan? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve requisition number 9767, Hutchinson Substation 115 kV rebuild, amendment number 1. Excuse
I'll
me.
second that.
Motion was made by Kathy, seconded by Don to approve as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Requisition approved. Thank you, Dan. Agenda item 8C, approval of natural gas firm capacity reservation agreement, and I'll turn that over to John.
Thank you. Last month, if you remember, you approved 3 agreements with Heartland Corn. This is the 4th and hopefully the last one that we'll have with them. Heartland Corn wishes to reserve capacity on our pipeline for future growth. They don't want to take the risk that in a year or 2 years, when they want to grow their ethanol plant, that there won't be any room left for them. So they're reserving an additional 4,700 decatherms a day at a slightly lower rate than our full firm transport. But that will result in about $172,000 of additional revenue for the utilities, just for reserving space for them for possible future growth.
And after this document is completed, what level of capacity are we at? Are we sold out, or we got some more to grow yet? Still some upside.
That's a hard question to answer. It depends on a lot of different factors.
Okay.
I don't know what New Ulm is going to reserve when they reapply or redo their contract again, because part of Heartland Corn is in New Ulm right now. But we still have a lot of capacity left.
Good. Any questions for John? I'd entertain a motion.
You reviewed the agreement, Mark?
Yep, everything's fine.
I'll make a motion to approve the natural gas firm capacity reservation agreement with Heartland Corn Products.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Don, seconded by Bob, to approve the firm capacity reservation agreement. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agreement approved. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 8D, approve authorization of additional $200,000 to the GE change orders. Jeremy and Mike are going to take that one.
Yeah, so, you guys had approved Jeremy to authorize, or up to the $500,000 of authorization, early in November, for change orders that came through on the GE, oil leak and NSR repairs, for the NSR repairs. For the LM6000, and to date, we're at $462,139,000. We currently are sitting with an additional $120,000 waiting for approval. So obviously we've hit our max. So I believe that $200,000 should get us through the additional change orders that for this project. We've opted out of a little over $200,000 in change orders, not to do them due to lead times and part availability, that they can't meet our deadline of spring to have the unit back. So, I mean, we're doing our best to get the unit back in time and getting this stuff done that could be done in our window. So I believe that $200,000 should be good, but you guys know kind of how this project's been going. So yeah, so I guess just looking for approval for Jeremy for another $200,000 and approval rights, or however you want to word it.
It's always a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling when your fate's in somebody else's hands that you can't control, right? And that's kind of where you're at. So. All the stuff that you're choosing not to change order, accept the change orders on, that's non-essential stuff that you feel isn't needed at this point, not still comfortable with the levels of safety or proper.
We're talking 62-week lead times, so I
Oh,
mean,
boy.
we don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the amount of hours we run, we're fine, because a lot of they're trying to rebuild it for the next cycle, so that would be the next major overhaul. We're not even to the first major overhaul.
Yeah, okay.
So they're trying to make it for another, 25, 50,000 hours, and we're not to the 50,000 hours. We're at 36,000 hours.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, so I mean, what they're not realistic for us to ever get to the next cycle anyways, because we're not to the first cycle.
So you have no concerns with the stuff that we're kind of lining out, Mike? You're okay with that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions from the commission on this project in general, or on the requested authorization today on the agenda?
So are you more optimistic on getting it back in time now than you were before?
It's still very dependent on the mid shaft.
Okay. We don't know anything else there yet.
But I did find a mid shaft from another source, but I don't know that GE will accept the other source because they're not a certified GE vendor.
Which we don't know if we need a different one yet.
Correct. But even the non-certified mid shaft is quite expensive.
Yeah.
And I had sent you guys that information just for some background. The other piece is it's stating in gate 1 still. You want to explain the gate 1 to them?
Well, yeah, so as we're trying to get through these NSRs and stuff, it's still sitting in the very first gate that we ever got into. So until all these NSRs are dispositioned, as they say, we will never get out of gate 1. So that's why it helps that we get the approval that we don't have to keep coming back for approval by the board. And Jeremy has some window for the approval process, so we can hopefully get this out of gate 1 so we can start getting things put back together.
How many gates are there?
For sure there's 3 gates.
That's what I thought too. He
For
said
sure.
And how you define gate 1 is if it's still sitting in gate 1, another comes forward that can move out of gate 1, then they leapfrog in front of our stuff. So, you made it clear that every time you guys wait to authorize something, things could jump in front of you.
Which I think proves the importance of the pre-approval of 500 and now an
Right.
additional 200
Absolutely.
to keep this thing moving in a timely manner. I had some questions for Jeremy on this, so I called him yesterday, I think, and I asked Jeremy the question of how much, if we miss our deadline of May, if we don't get it put in place in May, what does it cost us in each month to not have this thing up and running? And it's $200,000 a month, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think 220,000 roughly, 45 megawatts.
So once again confirms probably a legitimate reason of pre-approving Jeremy for this project.
But I also feel part of the problem is they haven't gotten us pricing and stuff back in a timely manner.
Correct.
Yeah.
For us to even get approval. And I tried to explain to them that we can't approve a $0. We need to know what to ask for, or I need to know what to ask for.
Yeah, you can't give him a blank check, right?
Correct.
Right.
That's fair.
So that's been part of the problem. And lead times also, I need to know what the lead times are going to be.
Yeah.
Because initially I gave them the go-ahead, and then they came back with the lead time on the 62 weeks, and it's like, ooh.
You knew that one wasn't gonna work right away. Has the conversations or process been smoother since your account manager has kind of been involved in the conversations? I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it's something like an account manager.
Kind of
Getting better maybe.
better. It's helped that I feel like they're understanding what we're after now.
Yep.
I feel like it was kind of learning curve for them to understand that in a perfect world, yeah, you can just keep it till everything's done, and we have a spare one sitting here, and we'll just throw it in, don't worry about it, but we don't, so we need it back, and so we're getting there.
Good.
Can't imagine that scenario actually ever works for anyone. Like, they would like it to. Who has one sitting just to put in place, and
Some do, we don't.
I can't imagine you ever want to go through this again.
Probably not.
A loaded question.
Only if you have to, right, Mike?
Right.
Well, I appreciate you guys going through this as carefully as it appears that you are, and not just trying to, rubber stamp every expense and keeping it within a reasonable amount, which it's growing. We kind of expected that it would, so I don't think it's a surprise there. And yeah, we're balancing two different factors: time and what we need to have done. So you guys are doing a good job. It's just cost is what it is. I think at this point there's not a lot we can do about that. And we can't afford for it not to be in service. So.
Correct.
And that got pretty clear in a hurry, right? Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve the authorization of an additional $200K to the GE change orders.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Matt, seconded by Kathy, to approve that agenda item 8D. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Authorization approved. Thank you, Mike. Next on the agenda is 8E, approve the 2024 pay grid. Jeremy, you taking that one?
Yep, sure will. So obviously customary every year in December, I ask the commission to approve not only the 5-year CIP in the operating budget, but also a pay grid shift that's incorporated in the operating budget. Obviously, typically we have a collective bargaining agreement either in place or it's on the same agenda as this one, so the commission is in a better spot of kind of where the whole organization is. Obviously, we're not going to be in that situation this time, but I did talk to the president. We felt it was prudent for you guys to really still approve a budget in December, approve moving a pay grid so that at least the non-union employees at this point can get performance reviews starting January 1st and get their pay adjusted accordingly based on the grid. You guys typically would like to see the certain indicators and have a consistent benchmark of indicators that you guys use and consider when you're moving the pay grid. Certainly you guys always have the ability to do something different, but I try to keep the information consistent as you guys would like to see. So for this year, when I pull up the latest CPI indicators that are being used on a consistent annual basis, most of those things are either in the 2s or 3s. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about just where inflation has been the last couple of years, not only on the union side, non-union side, and you guys are well involved in those types of conversations and know where things are at. So today, I'm asking you guys at least consider moving the grid 4%. If there's something else you guys want to do at a later date when the collective bargaining agreement comes to fruition and that comes back in front of you, you guys certainly have the ability to change the grid additionally if you would like or not, or you can consider those things. But at least to get something approved today and get something moving forward, I'm asking you guys, based on the indications and the indicators that are there, to move the grid 4%. That is also incorporated, a 4% grid shift is incorporated in the operating budget as well, so that would be consistent with you approving the operating budget at this point. Anticipating on the non-union side, probably sometime, as early as it'll be January, probably. It could go later based on kind of how things play out. So, I'm not still quite sure on the time frame of that piece, and I'll certainly communicate that, to our side as things move forward. But again, I think it is important that you guys get the budget approved here before the end of the year, so at least we know where we're at this point with the operating budget and the 5-year capital plan and things of that nature. So.
I'll add some context to that. Jeremy did call and say, hey, how do you want to handle this? And this was my advice. It's just assume something that's reasonable, and I think 4% is a reasonable assumption for now, and we can have a conversation about next steps if we want to revise the budget if a collective bargaining agreement comes in something different than that. And there's other things that fall out after we move the pay grid and approve the budget, so I thought being able to move forward with a reasonable assumption was important for a handful of reasons. Any questions on the agenda item for Jeremy?
Oh,
Any thoughts differently or concerns from the commission on taking this approach?
I think it makes sense to me.
yeah.
Allows us to still run our shop while we wait and see how long it takes for negotiations to finalize. So, if none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to either go with the recommended non-union pay grade of 4% for 2024.
I'll second. Motion by Bob, seconded by Kathy, to move the non-union pay grid 4% for 2024. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Grid shift approved. Thank you, Jeremy. Next agenda item is to approve the 2024 budgets and CIP. Jeremy, we'll go back to you.
Sounds good, thank you. So this is version 4 of the operating budget that I've been sending out to you guys. Obviously, you guys know I don't like to have that many versions of a budget.
I can't wait to see 5.
Years, so we could see 5, but it might be a record. But so that's what's in front of you today. I did, obviously, as I've made revisions to the budget, I've been sending you guys updates and emails on what things have changed. Some things on the operating side, expenses, some CIP things, and then some revenue things. Most recently, the Heartland Corn Reservation Agreement, I added some additional revenue and for additional reservation. So I put those all back in, and obviously wanted to get you guys the most accurate budget I could based on things that have come in late. I think that's important for you guys to see some of those things. And we try to get that information as quickly as we can, so we're not revising things, and some things, again, are out of our control, and we're waiting on other vendors or people to get us information. And sometimes it doesn't come until later in December. So version 4 is in front of you guys with the latest 5-year CIP, and so I'm just asking for you guys to approve the preliminary budget at this point. And again, touching on if you guys want to readdress something in the first part of next year, depending on how other things go, we can certainly do that as well.
So we had a budget workshop prior to the November 29th commission meeting. And for the most part, that held true. Some CapEx changes and some compensation changes that we just talked about. So those, while it is version number 4, I think it's safe to say that the adjustments have been minor. So I think I'm comfortable with it as presented. Commissioners have any questions for Jeremy or Jared on the budget?
In here.
Anything?
No? I agree. They seem to be minor. I'll make a motion to approve the 2024 operating budgets and 5-year CIP.
Second.
Motion was made by Don, seconded by Matt, to approve the budget and CIP as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget approved. Thank you, Jeremy, for all your work on that, and Jared and managers for all your efforts that go into that. It's a good, well thought out, detailed budget. And like I said, there's been four versions of it now, but they've all held pretty true, and I think that speaks to the thought and planning that went into the first version. So thank you for all your work on that. One passing thought as we consider in the future whether or not we revise the budget again based on how the collective bargaining agreement comes out. Jeremy and Jared, think about this. Would it matter if we would have to bond later this year? That would be my only thought. Internally, it bothers me less, but would it show something to a bond underwriter if we had another version of a budget after we know the changes to the collective bargaining? That's my only passing thought on that. All right. Next agenda item is agenda item 8G. And it's to conduct the performance review of the Hutchinson Utilities Commission General Manager pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3A. Jeremy, as you know, under Minnesota law, you have the right to either have this portion of the meeting open or closed. So before we go any further, you need to let us know whether you want to have the meeting closed or not.
I'd like to have it closed.
I would now entertain a motion to go into closed session to conduct the annual performance review of the Utilities General Manager, Jeremy Carter.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Kathy, seconded by Matt, to go into closed session to conduct Jeremy Carter's annual review. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion to close session is approved. Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Happy New Year.
That means we can